go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's up, everybody? I'm back here with another video today, and I got my guy Wayne Breezie out here today. Thank you for joining me, Wayne. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Chief, man. Things are going really well. You know, it's just a lot of never-ending story type of news going on with the 49ers, so I can't wait to break it down with you.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. You know, any press conference, any just small little thing, and that's just some new news. And yeah, I'm excited to just break it down. Obviously, we had the main thing was Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talking over the last 2 days at the NFL's annual meeting. And before we get started, let's just see some of the comments. CJ here. What up, Wayne?
What's going on, CJ? Thanks for tuning in.
And before we start, guys, for you guys in here, make sure you subscribe to Wayne's channel. Great content there, nitty gritty Niners every single Monday. He's just working his ass off, grinding for sure. So make sure you sub to his channel over there, and make sure you follow him on Twitter at Wayne Breezie. But let's get into the beginning part of it, man. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they talked over the last 2 days. What were your just original takeaways kind of from the two people talking?
Well, the first thing was I was so happy to hear from them because I felt like it's been since, the last game against the Rams, and they gave us kind of like that, we're ready to move on to Trey Lance and we can't wait to get started. And then next thing you know, we go through this quarterback carousel type of thing. And so it was really good to hear from them. But man, did they look exhausted. They look beat. Like they've been talking about it forever, and like we haven't heard from you for a few months. But no, it was really good to hear from those guys. John Lynch to start off with. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm confused with John because he's a little bit contradicting. He says one thing to one person, and then he comes out and says another thing. So I'm just kind of unsure what to believe when it comes to John Lynch. You know what I mean? But, that's what the 49ers have. Him and Kyle are like the same. They do exactly the same thing, but they just have different MOs to get to the same destination. And so when we heard from Kyle this morning, I'm like, okay, he's slightly using a different approach than John Lynch, but he's getting to the same he's getting the same points out, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is here. Trey Lance, we're looking to move forward. He's going to be the starter, but Jimmy's going to be here. We couldn't really move him because of the injury. Like, it's all coming out. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so finally, at least we can put some closure to this whole situation. But I, raising my hand, meaning myself, Wayne Breezie, have decided to just accept everything until it changes. I think that's what it is. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to accept it. It's Jimmy's here. Trey's here. We don't know who's going to start. And we're just going to have to wait and find out. Tune in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you're right. It's been a while, right? The last time they formally talked, at least both of them in the same capacity, was at the end of the season when they were doing their postseason presser. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo essentially say his goodbye, his farewell to the media, his farewell to the Niners organization in that press conference. And then now we get to see him here. Obviously, Lynch talked at the NFL Combine, but now both of them are talking here. And you're right. It's basically the same talk that both of them had. It's just they say it in different ways, right? I saw a lot of people frustrated at what Lynch said yesterday in that they weren't committing to a starter. It seemed like, they're a little bit they were kind of adjusting to the idea of Garoppolo, and people weren't like that. And then one of the tweets that I tweeted out, just verbatim what Lynch said, was about the trade offers, where he said, no, we didn't receive a formal offer. First of all, guys, when you guys are like looking at that, that's not necessarily true. Look, John Lynch is not going to come out and say, guys, we got offers, we declined them, and now we're stuck in this situation. If he says that, then he's just putting himself in a worse situation. I understand how bad it looks when you say we don't have trade offers on the table, but the fact is, if you say that you do and that you've you overplayed your hand and that you failed to actually recoup any value when it seems like you're not going to recoup value now, that's even worse from John Lynch. And that's why, I know for a fact that John Lynch actually had 2 trade offers on the table One was an insulting one from the Pittsburgh Steelers that John Lynch was absolutely insulted by. And then another one was from the Indianapolis Colts with the shoulder surgery kind of implicated into the deal. Both obviously didn't happen. Both teams also had their reservations because of the shoulder. And so obviously both teams now have their own quarterbacks, although I wouldn't rule out the Pittsburgh Steelers as a potential destination because Mitch Trubisky is actually only on a 1-year, $5 million guaranteed deal. That's kind of backup money, right? That's what we've seen as the market for backups. So I wouldn't rule out if the Steelers don't get a rookie in this draft, I would not rule out them as a Garoppolo destination post-draft time. But yeah, it was interesting because we saw both teams or both people, right? Like this morning, we saw Kyle Shanahan a little more enamored with Trey Lance. He was talking. He tried not to specifically talk about Lance, right? He was talking in the capacity of Brian Greasy, their quarterbacks coach. But when talking about Greasy, he only brought up two names. He brought up Nate Sudfeld and he brought up Trey Lance and how we're moving forward with Trey. So it's kind of like the 49ers aren't trying to put themselves in a bad position business-wise, right? They don't want to say we're going to outright cut Garoppolo because at least in their eyes, he still has value and they want to recoup some value for him. So it'd be a bad business move for that. But it does seem like, guess what? Garoppolo is not going to be on this roster in 2022.
I agree 100%. And here's the thing. They're not going to come out and say they're going to cut Garoppolo because the moment Jimmy Garoppolo gets cut, he's going to get picked up probably by 27 other teams that are saying that they don't want Jimmy Garoppolo. So let's just make this clear. It's not that teams don't want Jimmy Garoppolo. It's that teams don't want to pay for Jimmy Garoppolo. So if he becomes a free agent, they can go right there and negotiate. Jimmy, kind of like hurt, but I tell you what, you can come in and start if you want to play for, $11 million or something like that. And so I'm guarantee you that's what's going to happen. What John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are doing, especially Lynch, because this is his job, he's taking the upper hand. He's taking the power back. He's taking the control back of the situation. You heard them say, that they kind of got thrown with the curveball. Clearly, Rich Eisen talked about it on his show. He said, listen, they didn't know that Jimmy was going to need surgery. That just came out of nowhere, and they didn't advise him to get it. Jimmy decided on his own, with his own peoples, to go ahead and just get the surgery. And so that threw them a curveball, and they had to find a way to, save face. And so I think the 49ers organization front office has been doing a great job at trying to just clean it up, even though it looks like they fumbled, which they did. If they could have moved Jimmy quicker, they should have. They should not have been waiting to find the best destination for him. And in my opinion, that's where they screwed up by doing him right? Because that's the 49ers way now. That's kind of how we do things. We want to do right by the players that did right by us. And 9 times out of 10, you're okay with that. But in this situation, Jimmy tried to pull the okie doke on the 49ers, and it worked. But in the end, the 49ers will come out on top because, like you said, if the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's the example you used, God forbid Mitch Trubisky sucks, Jimmy's healthy, they're going to find a way to get Jimmy Garoppolo on that team, and the 49ers will get value for Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's what they're waiting on.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, when you look at it, right, the 49ers, they kind of there were two places in which they could have traded Garoppolo and they did it. The first was, like you just said, them overplaying their hand and then being blindsided by the news of the Garoppolo injury, right? Or the Garoppolo surgery, per se. Because, at the end of the season, it was known that Garoppolo had the torn thumb, which was likely to require surgery. But instead, it's the shoulder that ended up requiring surgery just 1 week, coincidentally, before free agency. That's one thing. The other was the Watson news, because the Watson news set up a quarterback carousel where he was originally supposed to hear his decision on April 1st, gets moved up to March 5th or something like that. And guess what? That Friday, the Watson news comes out. He's cleared of all charges. And from there, it allows him to get moved. Not only him, but Matt Ryan as well, finishing out 2 quarterback destinations that were likely to require quarterbacks after that. Because it didn't seem like the Browns were enamored with Baker Mayfield, and also the Indianapolis Colts was looking for a quarterback. And without the Watson news, it was uncertain that Matt Ryan was going to get moved either. So it cleared up 2 spots that were going to require quarterbacks. So it was a piece where the 49ers were blindsided themselves. And so that's the part where you can't necessarily fault them, although they are trying to save face. But then again, there likely was a window, especially with trade offers on the table. There was likely a window to move Garoppolo. And to just have not just to move the money, right? Because I don't necessarily think they would have spent the money the way people want them to spend it by going after marquee free agents. It's not just the money, but it's also you have to send a message, right? You have a third overall pick that you invested 3 first-round picks in, who hasn't seen the field like he should, like the other rookies have. It sends a message to him that he's a starter, and I'm sure they're doing that behind the scenes, but it sends the public message, and it also tells it gives a clear direction going forward, because right now we're still unknown with the direction of the 49ers. And if the direction is to still have these 2 quarterbacks, well, guess what? You're not maximizing your window. You're not putting all the effort towards Trey Lance, and you're not bettering this team heading into 2022, which should be the clear initiative when the NFC is as open as it has been for a while. They're only really that can compete with the 49ers right now. There's only the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Los Angeles Rams. The other teams have all taken a step back this offseason, which is why the 49ers should be trying to push forward and at least set a clear direction for where they should go.
Yeah, I maybe from a 49ers perspective, from their perspective, maybe they think that, the only team they really are worried about is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because of Tom Brady. I think that they felt like with a healthy, and hear me out, I know y'all gonna think I'm crazy. With a healthy Garoppolo, they beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Let's just keep it above. With a healthy Jimmy, they win. And see, I didn't know, you didn't know, a lot of us didn't know this shoulder injury and how detrimental it was to Jimmy's playing. And I'm not blaming that on Jimmy's play. He was terrible in the playoffs. But I'm thinking that maybe they feel that with a healthy Jimmy, we win that game. And so they keep Jimmy on the roster for right now. It's all like a game of, it's a game. So they're keeping him on the roster. They're looking forward to moving on with Trey Lance. You heard Kyle Shanahan say it. At least that gave me some assurance when Matt Miyoko, I think, asked the question about, what are your plans kind of like with Trey Lance and, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yo, we wouldn't have been looking to move Jimmy if we didn't think Trey Lance was going to be ready to go. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so they like you said, they clearly tried to move Jimmy Garoppolo, but I don't think the 49ers feel like anyone in the NFC is going to give them problems. I think they feel like they're still the best team in the NFC, which is crazy to us because we lost Lake and Tomlin. We're not going to be the same team coming back. We added a couple of pieces and we lost some key pieces, right? We lost a good defensive tackle. We lost a Pro Bowl offensive lineman. Those are key cogs, okay? And they didn't replenish those key cogs. They're looking to use other players feeling like they can, replenish it. And then again, like you said, we don't have a sense of direction, meaning that you, I, the rest of the faithful, everybody else, we don't know what we're going to do. And that's why I think we're looking to get, hey, Kyle, just tell us who's going to start. Because at least we can start saying, all right, so we're going to go get some wide receivers that can run down the field because Trey Lance is going to look to throw the deep ball, opposed to getting the other guys that can just do a lot of yak, right? And so we don't have a sense of direction, but I think Kyle Shanahan kind of made it somewhat a bit more clear to what's going on, but then he funnels Jimmy back in there. And then Jed York, who doesn't speak ever, comes out, has a nice conversation, and I like the Jed York approach. Look, I'm just the owner. I'm just going to co-sign what they want. I tell you what, they've messed up. It's on them. I'm not going to get into the football decisions, but I will support what they want. So if Jimmy Garoppolo is on this roster and they want him here, I'm willing to pay him to be a backup. That's what the owner said. I'm like, no, please don't do this. You did this to us in 2021 when you was willing to pay him to be a starter. And so that type of co-signage, that type of freedom, that type of, stuff from your owner, man, it makes the situation for us oh, man, it's never ending. Just accept it. Guys, we just got to accept it. Until he's gone, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to Martin Lawrence and Woosaw and just accept the Jimmy Garoppolo debacle. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we can kind of take away from their words that was somewhat, he's too good to be cut. And the reason is Garoppolo he valued. While the teams may not show it right now, it's not necessarily because of his play, but because of contract. Garoppolo is still a low-end quarterback in the NFL, starting quarterback in the NFL. He's still he can still produce at a starting caliber level. And that's not the problem problem. The problem obviously is his contract. And so it'll be interesting because what Lynch said yesterday was that Garoppolo is not going to be healthy for the at least the beginning portion of the offseason program. All
That's
the
what he
reps are
said.
going to Trey, and he actually name dropped Nate Sudfeld as well. He said all the opportunities are going to Trey and Nate Sudfeld. You don't drop a third string quarterback's name in a press conference. No, they went into this offseason with the narrative that Nate Sudfeld was actually going to be QB2, and they backed it up with the way that they paid. I know he put up 2 right there, and that's the $2 million guaranteed that Nate Sudfeld got, which is backup level money. They don't pay a guy and they don't name a guy like that saying he's going to get opportunity without having a distinct role for him, which is that backup quarterback role, which is why it's likely that Garoppolo isn't on this roster week 1. It's just them trying to salvage the value.
Yeah. Nate Sudfeld's the backup. Trey Lance is the starter. Jimmy's an option. That's how I'm looking at it. That's it. That's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm accepting it. I'm receiving
some other things that Kyle Shanahan said. Yeah. Some other things that Kyle Shanahan say regarding other players. Javon Kinlaw.
Oh man, let's talk about it. Yes.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Javon Kinlaw?
I feel like before Javon went on Brad's show, I remember coming out stating something about Kinlaw was going to have a monstrous year. He's going to be healthy, and we just have to, just believe. You know what I'm saying? And then when you heard him talk, you heard him, his confidence. Like you heard him say he felt really good. Like he's felt the best he's ever felt. Like, for a player to say that, because you got to remember when these players are playing football, they don't get the treatments in college, in high school, that you get with the professional level of money. Like you don't get the same treatment. And so he finally was able to get some treatment on his knee. Now, I'm not saying he's all the way healed. He didn't say he was all the way healed. But Kyle Shanahan says, look, I'll be looking out the window and that cat working out. Like he looks good. Like he looks good. And when your coach comes out and says a player looks good, then bet you by golly, wow, I'm going to believe that the player looks good. Because either they're going to say that a player looks good. They never say when a player looks bad. They just don't talk about the player. They'll deflect the question. But when a player looks good, he talked about, and you know what else he mentioned? Aaron Banks.
Yeah.
Aaron Banks, the second round draft pick for the 49ers out of Notre Dame, power zone scheme guy, probably lost 20 pounds. Probably was put on a weight loss regimen, and it took him all year to get there. And now that he's there, he's going to be worked. I think Aaron Banks might be a surprise. That's why I said we may just have to trust a little bit more on what they're going to do. We don't know the exact plan, but we have to have an inkling and put the puzzle pieces together. Aaron Banks was brought here for a reason. We just don't know because he doesn't fit a Kyle Shanahan's offense. But maybe he does fit a Kyle Shanahan's offense.
But the thing is, you said it. He was probably put on that weight loss regimen, especially after he had his injury in the offseason. And Kyle Shanahan, the one thing he also said about Aaron Banks today is, if you asked if he was ready to start midseason, I would have said yes. He was ready to start midseason. The one thing about Aaron Banks, though, was they didn't want to mess up how they were already playing. Obviously, it's midseason. You don't want to mess up the chemistry with the offensive line, especially with those guys who've been key calls over years, like Daniel Brunskill, who's been with the team for a couple of years. You don't want to mess up the chemistry in the middle of the season. Hence also why they didn't move on from Jimmy Garoppolo at key points, like Kyle Shanahan mentioned. He said that Trey Lance was very close to starting before that Week 10 matchup, before the Bears game too, before Garoppolo had his good games. Then he's like, guess what? I don't want to mess up the chemistry. There's a certain reason. And so it's not always indicative of the player, but just of how the season's going and how you want to manage your team. And so that's what I got out of the Aaron Banks statements. And that shows a little more confidence. If he was ready to start in a very complex offensive system that normally takes a year to a year and a half to develop or to master, if he was ready to start halfway through last season, that shows confidence in me that he's able to start this year, especially if he's moving back to his normal position of left guard, which he's had familiarity with during his entire career at Notre Dame.
Yeah, man, that's where it belongs. And at least that's a plug piece that we were talking about. So maybe they didn't address the guard position at the left guard. Now, right guard is a whole different thing. And as much as I love a Daniel Brunskill, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to Raphael 5629ers. Much as I love Daniel Brunskill, I definitely feel like we should upgrade the right freaking guard position, right? And just Brunskill's on the team. He's gonna make his little money and he can be serviceable to where they need him because injuries happen, right? But go upgrade. That's why in this draft, go get me Dylan Parham out of Memphis. Go get me one of those guys. Go get me Jamari Sawyer out of Georgia. These guys can play guard, tackle, center, whatever, right? They're athletic enough to play multiple positions. Donovan West out of Arizona State, guard, center. These are guys. Cam Jurgens, who's probably
a monster.
It's ridiculous. And Kyle needs athletic guys because we're trying to kick outside, and the guards got to be at that second level, squaring it off down that field for these running backs. So look, I like what we're doing. I think Aaron Banks is going to be the plug and play guy at left guard. And I think you get to use Jalen Moore. Now, he's a tackle, right? Jalen Moore is a tackle. He's probably going to start over Mike McGlinchey if he's not ready to go. And there you go. So the offensive line, though we don't see it as perfect because we lost pieces, it may be intact under Kyle Shanahan's plan. And they still may address it in the draft because this draft has some really good guys that you can probably have and be upgrades over some of the guys you got. And don't forget Colton McKivitz. And then we signed that guy, oh my God, last name, Sutherland. Keaton Sutherland, right? Don't know what he's going to be able to do. Don't know if he'll even make the team. You still have Alfredo Gutierrez, right? He's still on the team. So if the 49ers have some players for depth, for camp, and they're also going to have some guys that they're going to look to be starters, and I expect them to draft guys, fix that offensive line, and then they can fix us. I think they're going to be just fine. I really do. Regardless of who's going to play quarterback, the 49ers are looking to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think at this point, we can kind of clearly say that they're comfortable with the guys that they currently have. They do have the one thing that they do have, while they might not know who their starters are for next season, the thing that they currently have is depth. You've got guys like Daniel Brunskill, Justin Skule, and the guys you just mentioned alongside Jake Brendel, who's the backup center, as depth pieces who you can plug and play at certain positions should you need to. I do think that Daniel Brunskill, he can serve as a right guard, but I do think that he's better off as a swing tackle, preferably at right tackle, and he could push Mike McGlinchey like Jalen Moore. He could push Mike McGlinchey in training camp to try and get that right tackle spot should McGlinchey not be healthy. And I do think that we could definitely go in the draft. You named a couple of guys. This is a deep class at offensive line, preferably the interior positions. Cam Jurgens is a guy. Donovan West is a guy. Dylan Parham's a guy. And there are a good amount of guards in this class with also center flexibility, which Kyle Shanahan likes as well, that flexibility along the offensive line. And not to mention, there's still a good amount of players in free agency should the 49ers want to go for them. I don't know how many players will be available post-draft, but there's still guys like Try Turner, Ethan Posich, J.C. Treader's one guy. J.C. Treader.
That's my number one. That's the number one.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, there are options on both sides. Should the 49ers want to continue the regime of not going young and going a little bit of the more experienced players at the interior positions, or they have the option to go young and continue their path this offseason where they've prioritized youth players going into the Trey Lance era. So there are definitely options on both sides. I do think that they seem fairly content with their offensive line right now. I mean, it was a top 10 unit last year, and we had guys like Tom Compton and Daniel Brunskill playing on the right side of the offensive line with injuries to guys like Trent Williams and throughout the season. So when you look at it, it was still a top 10 unit. I do think that it's a good unit still. I do, though, think that there are many options where you can still improve at cost-effective solutions on the offensive line.
I agree 100%. 100%. Fix that offensive line. I think that would help 49ers fans, because regardless if it's Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo back there, until the offensive line fixed, any quarterback would struggle. I prefer Trey Lance because at least he'll have some type of escapability type of mode, or if the play breaks down, he can extend the pocket, extend the play. So you get that opposed to just sitting back there taking sacks. So, but shout outs to Trey, man. He's out there putting in the work, man. He's out there in SoCal. Him and Nate Sudfeld out there in SoCal training with John Beck, getting it in right now. Brandon Ayuk is out there working out with them. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch.
Definitely. Another thing that Kyle Shanahan brought up today was about his quarterbacks coach, Brian Greasy, when he was talking about Trey Lance. He said that Brian Greasy was one of the smartest minds. Actually, I think he said he was the smartest mind around football that I've ever seen before when he and two were together in Tampa Bay. I wanted to ask, what are your opinions on Brian Greasy being hired as the quarterbacks coach, kind of as the guy who's going to now be the most involved with Trey Lance at the quarterback position?
I thought Brian Greasy was the right hire. I mean, we all wanted, was it John Beck? Like, we all wanted somebody else in
John
here.
Beck,
We all
yeah.
wanted him. We wanted the guy. Where did he end up going to? Like Houston. We all wanted somebody different, and I get it.
Yeah,
But
Pep Hamilton was the other guy.
Yeah, Hamilton, Pep. But the moment that they signed Brian Greasy, I said, oh, this is a winner. This is a winner. See, you guys forget Brian Greasy also faced adversity as a quarterback in the NFL. Like he got drafted to a team. He was a backup guy. Guy had to get injured. He got injured, took his team to the player. He's a guy that faced adversity and won. Trey Lance is facing adversity right now. And why not bring in a quarterback coach with that mentality, with the mindset of breaking down the X's and O's? Trey Lance is already a student of the game. When you put Brian Greasy, a quarterback's mind to quarterback coach, a quarterback, that's a no-brainer. And so for me, I thought this was the right hire. See, a lot of people will keep saying, oh, we're picking the wrong guys. We're signing the wrong people. We're getting the wrong coaches. No, we're getting the right coaches. It might not be the most expensive all free agents. It might not be the players that we think we want here, but we're getting the right pieces. And so we say we trust Kyle and then we don't trust Kyle. I trust Kyle. You know, the only thing I'm going to question Kyle on is Jimmy Garoppolo. That's it. Other than that, I trust everything else he says. Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing. I thought Greasy was the perfect hire for the 49ers because you're bringing in a quarterback to coach a quarterback opposed to our former quarterback's coach.
Yeah, I thought when I saw the hire, I think I was live when I saw the hire with Marco. And the one thing that I said is I'll give Kyle Shanahan the benefit of the doubt because he's one of the smartest minds. And even if Brian Greasy doesn't prove to be the best coordinator or best quarterbacks coach possible out there that Kyle Shanahan could hire, guess what? Kyle Shanahan, he himself said today that he's still going to be very involved with the quarterback. And he's had a very constant communication this offseason with Trey Lance, where he hasn't had that with Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. He's had it with Trey Lance, though, and it proves how involved he is with the quarterbacks. So even if Brian Greasy didn't work out, there's still Kyle Shanahan's trust in Trey Lance and Kyle Shanahan's work with Trey Lance, which should eventually make Trey Lance one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That's the key thing, because really don't. It doesn't matter who's kind of part of the formula as long as Kyle Shanahan's part of the formula. Because we've seen how he works with quarterbacks, and now he's got the best potential quarterback that he's ever had with any situation in Trey Lance. And when you see Kyle Shanahan speak of Brian Greasy, saying how he's one of the smartest minds, guess what? Some of the smartest minds at quarterback don't necessarily pan out because they don't have the talent. But the mind is what's translating. And it's not like Brian Greasy is going to play for the 49ers. Instead, it's him using his mind that's going to help Trey Lance just get more advanced, not only with the 49ers system, but with the game of football at the NFL level. And it's something that Kyle Shanahan said that was necessary because it provided experience in the quarterback's room, right? When you have guys like Bobby Slowick and Kyle Shanahan, both of them didn't play in the NFL, but now you have a guy who did play in the NFL, has perspective as a commentator and as an analyst, but also as the quarterback and now as a coach. He's got different perspectives. So that's where I like the hiring, but also I put the benefit of the doubt in a way in Kyle Shanahan, because I do think that whatever happens, he's going to find a way to make it work with his quarterbacks.
Absolutely, because he's the head coach. And Kyle Shanahan will find a way. If something's not like working out finite, I love the relationship Kyle is building with Trey Lance. And I don't think he built that with Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can go back and you can check the games, right? Check the Houston game. Trey makes mistakes, right? And Kyle is getting at Trey Lance, but not
Right,
in the
and that's
same
what you
type of way
want.
he would use. Yeah, we watch Jimmy get cursed out and Trey Lance just get talked to. Like, it's a big difference. Hey, Trey, man, maybe you could have just threw that low. Like, that ball's a little high, try not to do it again. And Trey was more down than Kyle Shanahan after throwing an interception in that game, right? But then when you look at him getting on Jimmy Garoppolo, he expects Jimmy to not make the same bowhead mistakes over and over and over again. So his relationship is different. I love the relationship that Kyle has. Just his answer today when Matt Miyoko asked him the question, let me know that they're moving forward. That's it.
Yeah,
They're moving
exactly.
forward.
Exactly.
They just have an option right now.
Right. And Kyle Shanahan's a guy who will be hard on his players. That's something you want from a head coach like him because he has a way that he wants his offense to operate. And so when you see it, some people interpret that type of message as, guess what? He's chewing out his player. It's not a good relationship, except it's the opposite. He knows that because he has that relation with Trey Lance, he's able to do that and it gets communicated the right way. And also, the one thing that I'm really intrigued now with Brian Greasy and Trey Lance, the relationship between the two is Kyle Shanahan himself has said Trey Lance is one of the smartest football minds that have been near. He said that Trey Lance knew the entire playbook and the entire offense last training camp itself, at the end of last training camp and in the preseason. And now you pair him with one of the smartest mind that he's ever witnessed as a quarterback in Brian Greasy. I think that's going to be a good comparison. And definitely that just made me a little more excited for this new regime because Kyle Shanahan not only is putting his faith with Trey Lance, but also putting his faith in the new quarterbacks coach that he hired, kind of showing where they're moving forward with this offense.
And I think you said it a little bit earlier. It's not even just the faith that he's putting in these guys, Trey Lance and Brian Greasy. It's the trust. He's trusting them. Right. And Kyle usually doesn't trust. You have to earn Kyle Shanahan's trust. It's a really tough thing to do. And Peter King went and said this maybe about a month and a half ago. I think he was being interviewed. I think he was on the Matt Miyoko show on the 49ers Talk podcast. And I think he said that Peter King said that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were enamored by Trey Lance. I've never heard that word be used by any player. They should be enamored by Deebo Samuel. They should be enamored by George Kittle or what these guys, Trent. They're enamored by Trey Lance. That means that we haven't seen what they've seen. That should speak volumes.
And the one thing that you brought up earlier, right? The 49ers kind of trying to do right by the player, it has its consequences. We saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo, but the one thing is it also has its positives. Kyle Shanahan has a great relationship with Deebo Samuel. They've consistently talked about it over the season on how it's not even just player and coach, but it's just person in person where they talk about things like Samuel being a dad and their experiences that they've shared together, and they have a close connection because of that. And it seems like he's having a close connection with Trey Lance, who now he's in constant communication with throughout the offseason. And it's nice to see where a player and coach bond so well, whereas you don't always see that in other organizations, where other players are standing up for their coach and other players are standing up for each other in this locker room. And that's why I'm excited that if Trey Lance even has some ups and downs, especially with Jimmy Garoppolo off the roster, if Lance has that ups and downs, I'm excited because the locker room, I have full confidence that they're going to pick their quarterback up and just make him or give him the correct advice and just pick him up. And now they're going to be for the better in terms of from a team perspective. And that's kind of something that I'm interested in seeing over this course of the season, because I do think that they're going to bounce back from their mistakes. And that's just the locker room kind of chemistry that they've built under the regime of Kyle Shanahan as the head coach.
I agree. And that's why if Trey's here in May going through OTAs, he gets through training camp, he takes all the reps, Kyle Shanahan can't ever look back because the continuity and the chemistry that he's going to be building, that Trey Lance is going to be earning the trust in his wide receivers to be at spots where they need to be, that needs to remain intact as they go into the preseason and into the regular season. Kyle should not change that. If Kyle happens to change something like that, I have to question our head coach. That doesn't mean that I don't trust him, but I have to question him because Trey is here to build that. You let Jimmy do it for 4 years. If Trey's the guy that Kyle says he is, then Kyle's going to have to allow and trust Trey to do exactly that right there. Let him build his rapport with his players. He's already working out. I mean, shoot, I used to say this and I used to get a lot of flack, but you really hear about I never heard about Jimmy Garoppolo working out. Now, I'm not saying he didn't throw with wide receivers or things like that, but you didn't really hear much about it. And then people be like, oh, well, they don't have to report everything that they do. They don't. They absolutely don't. But you know what? When guys like Trey Lance and guys like Brandon Ayuk and guys on this team are trying to get better and improve, they come together, they figure out a way to get together, link up, work out, get reps in, and that is what wins football games. Week 16, 17, playoffs, that's how you win games. That's how you build chemistry.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, even at the end of the offseason, right, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch actually said to Trey Lance that they said in their press conference that they want Trey Lance to actually spend some time away from the football field before starting his offseason regimen. They were going to send him down to John Beck, obviously, at some point, like right now, where they are now currently practicing, but they wanted to spend some time away. And that just shows to Trey Lance's character and work ethic, because he is super into football, and that's something that he continues to practice. We saw him in early February working out with Zach Wilson, and that was not even football work, right? That was just conditioning work, getting himself ready. And now Kyle Shanahan did confirm that him and Nate Sudfeld, not Jimmy Garoppolo, and Nate Sudfeld, both of those two players are now down in in Los Angeles working with Brandon Ayuk and John Beck, the two quarterbacks for the 49ers in 2021. So there have been continuous clear indications of where the 49ers are going to go at quarterback in 2021. And Kyle Shanahan's words just continue to show kind of how Trey Lance is working, and also what the 49ers plans are for 2022.
There you have it. There you have it.
Yeah. One signing happened today. The 49ers re-signed running back, or it was a couple of days ago, but the 49ers did re-sign Jeff Wilson Jr., made it official today. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's funny because Jeff Wilson Jr. posted it that he was going to be returning, and we were like, oh yeah. And so we were waiting for it, and we took his word for it because he put it on his Instagram. Listen, Jeff Wilson Jr. is a running back for the 49ers, and we know what he can do. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he can run. And I've been watching him work out this offseason, and I'm telling you, it's back. Like, the cuts are there. His footwork is there. The running back's room is starting to look healthy, and that's important. Because Kyle Shanahan, the one thing he can do is work through some daggone running backs, right? Like, he can work his running backs, right? We watched Elijah Mitchell get dinged up, Michael Hasty dinged up, Trey Sermon dinged up. Like, everybody just gets dinged up because he just kind of like knows he works them. The running backs actually play an intricate role in this system. And why not bring a guy back that's betting on himself? And so he signs a deal, 1-year deal, where he's betting on himself, right? He's saying, look, right, I can come out here and I can do everything. You just got to give me the opportunity. Now, Elijah Mitchell seems to be the guy. Trey Sermon is trying to come up in the field. Jermichael Hasty is a 4th-year guy now, right? 3rd or 4th-year guy. Jeff Wilson Jr., this is his 3rd or 4th year. Like, they really got to kind of show up, because they're playing on those deals where they got to kind of show and prove, right? They'll still probably be eligible for a little practice squad stuff. I don't think they accrued enough games. And I think that's also a trick that Kyle Shanahan uses, and that's why we didn't see much of Jeff Wilson Jr. last year, so he can get him back this year on a cheap deal and blah, 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 blah. I just think there's a lot of politics in the football, but it's cool. I'm glad that he resigned. I think he fits the 49ers very well. I think he runs angry, right? And I love it. I love it. He can average what? Let me pull up his stats while you talk. Jeff Wilson Jr., when he's healthy, he was averaging, 4 or 5 yards a pop. He reminds you of Tevin Coleman.
Yeah, and Jeff Jr. definitely was a good addition, I think. I think it was either going to be him or Ricky Mostert. I was an advocate for Mostert, but on that 1-year, $3.125 million, especially to be kind of a secondary role now with how his age and how his injuries have gone, I don't know if I'd pay that much for a secondary running back, especially when the 49ers value these value signings, because Jeff Wilson is only making $1.035 million this season, which $530,000 is only guaranteed. The $530,000 guarantee kind of indicates that he will make the 53-man roster come training camp and all that. So I do believe that Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be a part of this rotation. But it also shows the 49ers are strengthening the rotation by bringing back guys, because now you have Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, and Jeff Wilson Jr. alongside JaMychal Hasty. Not sure if Hasty makes the roster or not. I don't necessarily have full confidence in him yet. And it also shows, because Kyle Shanahan does have the ability to draft a running back this year with the 9 draft picks that they do have. They normally carry 4 running backs on the roster. They carried 4 last year, and then a fullback in Kyle Juszczyk. So you can carry Jeff Wilson Jr., who I expect them to do. And with this signing, I do expect kind of a change back to the 2019 kind of world and back to the 2020 kind of world. And what I mean is running back by committee. Last year, because of injury, they were forced to kind of go and use Elijah Mitchell as a bell cow. And while it worked, he averaged 4.7 yards per carry and got 963 yards, as we know. He was injured consistently, and that's something the 49ers want to improve on. Just remaining healthy throughout the 2022 season and adding Jeff Wilson Jr. to this mix, a guy who isn't off much, who doesn't have much like tread on him from last season, because
Correct.
The 49ers were conservative using him, especially down the line, coming back from that meniscus injury. They were a little conservative using him. So now he has a good amount of tread still on him. He's only 30 or 31, I believe. And now he's going into a season on a prove-it deal where he's, again, going to look to make the most out of his season coming in fully healthy. And I think that that's a huge benefit for the 49ers, especially because of one thing you said, and that's the receiving aspect. When you look at who they hired this offseason, Anthony Lynn. What has Anthony Lynn liked in his running backs?
Yeah,
pass
catching
ability.
backs.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
When he was in Los Angeles, who did he have? Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, both who were
He's
involved
also a
in
free
the pass
agent
catching
too.
ability. Who?
Yeah.
Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon.
I wouldn't be surprised they bring in guys to compete. Like, I just wouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing, in Detroit, he was in Detroit last year. DeAndre Swift kind of came out as a pass catcher. He wasn't as good as a running guy. He wasn't as good as a running guy last year. He only averaged about 4 yards per carry, but he was a big time pass catcher for Jared Goff.
I tell you what,
that was very helpful for Jared Goff last year. Yeah,
he almost whipped our tail. Like, I know that week 1 when they started coming back, it was DeAndre Swift.
Yeah,
and they had another running back that was gashing us up for yards too. But I just want to Jeff Wilson Jr. last year, 294 yards. Remember, he had a limited season, but he gave us 294 yards on 79 attempts, 3.7 yards to carry, a little less than that 4.5 yards that Kyle Shanahan wants, but he did have 2 TDs on the ground. Look, he's going to provide yardage. Like, that's what he's going to do. Short yardage, long yardage. He could break big runs. You could use him at the goal line. We used to remember that? He was our goal line
back. 2020, right? He had like 7 touchdowns or something like that.
Yeah. This guy provides value. And I think, luckily, he was willing to sign. He had 600 yards too in 2020, 126.
And it was on that committee type of value too, right? I had to see about 125 carries for that 600 yards, somewhere around there. It was on that committee value, and that's where Jeff Wilson can kind of keep the tread on him while also showing his value in a 49ers type of system, which is the role that he should take this offseason, because he's likely going to slot in as that number 2 back for the 49ers behind Elijah Mitchell, competing with Trey Sermon. And now with all 3 kind of fully healthy and now a year into the system, I do think that that's going to be helpful. And last season was technically somewhat of a down year for the 49ers running backs. And still, the 49ers rushing attack was lethal. Imagine now we have a full group where now we're also including Trey Lance, who possesses the running ability, which should only further our running game with the runs that he's going to have. Now this running group is going to be even better, along with a more lethal passing attack with Trey Lance, who's got the ability to push the ball downfield.
I like the way you think, Rohan. I like the way you think.
Now, what are the remaining areas kind of that we got to, as we talked about offensive line, but a good amount of places we've improved this offseason. There still are some holes. Where are the remaining places kind of that you want to improve on for this team?
I still think we need to improve the secondary. We need a safety. Okay. We need a safety. And whether you say, hey, Jimmy, man, go play in the box, and you find that ball hawking safety to play the deep field. Like, I don't care how they do it. They need a safety. I like George Odom, but I don't know what he's going to bring to this team. He didn't do much in Indianapolis because he was behind some guys. Can he? Possibly. Yeah. But he hasn't And so, like, I'm not sold on him. And then I know a lot of people like Tavarius Moore. Okay. I still think he struggles. That's what I do. In the run game, he takes poor angles. Like, I just think he's a little bit of an upgrade over who Marcel Harris was. And I hope they don't bring him back because he's like next on that 1-year deal. Like, they're going down the line to see who they can sign on the 1-year deal, guys, and bring them back. But I think we need a safety. And I'm all for bringing back the guy that was the safety. I'm all for bringing Tart back. You know why? Because of chemistry. Okay, we talked about chemistry. So Tart's not going to get you the interceptions. All right, let's accept it. He's not going to get his interceptions. Cool, no problem. What he does is he doesn't. If he gets beat on a play, he has the speed to track the play down and not give up the touchdown. Right? He's always there around the ball. He can strip and force fumbles. He can make tackles. He's great against the run. There's a lot of stuff they do. The only bad thing about Tart is he's getting older and he always struggles with some type of injury at some point in the season, and it's always at the wrong time for the 49ers. That's his downfall. But if you could bring him back, bro, on one of those veteran deals, I don't think he's going to get picked up. No disrespect to him, but I don't think a team's going to offer him a lot of money. And you saw today my boy Jabril Peppers go to the freaking Patriots, which I'm mad about. Anyway, I think we should bring Tart back if we're not looking to draft, and still draft a guy. Like that's how I'm thinking. And develop Hufanga. We can do it.
I agree. I mean, me personally, it might be somewhat of a hot take, but I don't think there's another starting caliber safety on this roster apart from Jimmy Ward. I think he's the only starting caliber safety on our roster currently. I know we have Hufanga, I know we have George Odom, and I know we have Tarvarius Moore. I'm not as high on Tarvarius Moore as a lot of other people, and I'm also worried not only about his talent, but about him coming off of injury. I know he's just 25, but he still has some struggles. I don't think he's the best guy in pass coverage, and I do think Hufanga is better in the run game than him. So where's the value in having Tarvarius Moore right now? I'm not necessarily sure.
Special teams, possibly?
Special teams possibly, but we have George Odom for that exactly, and we have Hufanga for that exactly. So the thing is, I don't necessarily know the value of Tarvarius Moore. I do think that if the 49ers don't get another safety, he's likely to take over. Him and Hufanga are likely to take over that role, but I do think that that's a serious downgrade from Jaquiski Tartt. I'm a proponent of bringing Jaquiski Tartt back, and I'm also a proponent of drafting a safety. I think the 49ers over the last 2 seasons have implemented this somewhat of a plan where they compete in the present, but also work to the future. And if you draft a guy while also bringing back Jaquiski Tartt, potentially a guy like Herbie Joseph out of Illinois who plays.
Don't talk about my favorite safety, man. You can't talk about my favorite guy. That's the guy. That's the guy.
He plays he is. And I drafted him yesterday
safety.
in my mock drafts.
Yeah, he's a free. He can roam the field. Like, I know we want to go ahead and we want to sign Tyrann Mathieu. I get it. Who wouldn't? He doesn't give me Tyrann Mathieu vibes, but he can play the field like that. Like, so he can play free. And he can play in the box.
He's the physical presence as well. Like, the thing is, like the 49ers love versatility in that secondary. They like to move Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward has not played free safety as much over the last 2 seasons. He's moved around. He's played in the nickel. He's played in the box. He's played a single high. He moves around everywhere. And so the 49ers should benefit by having another safety that has that similar value. That's why chemistries work between Tartt and Ward, because they're interchangeable. They can play in different roles. And if you have another safety like that, guess what? That's only going to improve the chemistry of the young guy and Jimmy Ward, who's likely to stay for the next couple of seasons. So that's why I think it's better if the 49ers do retain Jaquiski Tartt and also draft a safety, because now you can set up that bridge. Not only do you set up that bridge, though, but you can implement the 3 safety rotations that you had last offseason and now have them to a better function. Because Hufanga last year, he was good, but I think that you can upgrade there with that 3 safety rotation by having a guy like Herbie Joseph. And now guess what? Your secondary just went from maybe an average secondary to a top 10 secondary, and potentially even better with those 2 additions. Because now you have a solidified cornerback group, but you also have a solidified safety group. Now guess what? You have an elite pass rush, which should only get better with draft picks, alongside a very solid linebacker group that retained everyone from last season, and now I guess a top 10 secondary. And I think that just improves your defense, which is the most important facet of your football team.
I agree, because defense wins championships. And I know that's cliche, but that's the way it is. That's the way it is. And here's the cool thing, right? I'm all for the scenario that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, Kirby would be a guy, but if there are guys that I like better than Kirby. Don't get it twisted. I just feel like he'll be in that range that we can pick from between 61 to 105. I feel like he'll be in that range as a safety. And he's tall, he's big. He's not a skinny, type of safety. I love him. As far as what we have, you mentioned Hufanga. I like Hufanga. I'm not gonna front. I like him. Does he have to get better? Absolutely. But here's what they're bringing into the camp. Hufanga will make the team. He was a draft pick. I don't think Tarvarius Moore, it's going to be between Tarvarius Moore, let me say his name correctly, my apologies. George Odom might not make the squad. Just because they sign these players in free agency don't mean that they have outs, and then it might not hit them as far as hard against the cap like we think it is or whatever. So there's going to be outs. It's going to come down to a battle. Kyle is building his team based off of depth. And the one thing you just said is what I wanted to touch on. The depth will be better because if you make the starting unit better and you already had guys in the depth that played in your starting unit so that they could still get better, that means your depth is going to be better. So when you have to rotate a guy out, guys will be fresh and they can come in and you won't skip a beat. And that is the key. And I think Kyle Shanahan finally figured it out. We need our depth to be good as well as the starters. That's what it is. I think every team wants to do that, but I think Kyle, year 5? This is what he's really trying to do.
I agree. And he kind of pointed to it last season, right? Because he finally, in the first 3 years of the Shanahan regime, we saw a different mentality. We saw him trying to sign these big, big players, or so how you call it. You saw him trying to trade for these big name players. Quan Alexander, Weston Richburg, D Ford in the trade, Jimmy Garoppolo he extended or traded for and then extended. You see him trying to get these big moves, right? And then in 2019, who was our defensive line? It was elite. Don't get me wrong, it was elite. It was D Ford, DeForest Buckner, Arik Armstead, and then Nick Bosa. Elite group of 4, but lack of depth. Now in 2020 and 2021, he's now changing it, re-signing his key players, but now signing depth. Arden Key, Jordan Willis, who he traded for, Charles Omenihu, who he traded for. And, he's getting these depth pieces on that defensive line where now you can roster 10, 11 guys. And guess what? With that depth, this unit in 2021 was arguably better than the unit in 2019, and it doesn't have the household names that you might think. Arden Key is a guy who we picked up for $1 million, right? Charles Omenihu makes less than $1 million. Jordan Willis makes a similar amount. It's not like we're picking up guys that we're paying $17.5 million for. In fact, I think D Ford was our second highest guy behind Arik Armstead in terms of paid money last season, and he played in 5 games, 6 games. He didn't even play a big portion. So you're right. It's depth now that kind of matters. And Kyle Shanahan figured it out at his team's most important position, defensive end. We're now starting to see him pick up these different players. At the safety position, we just outlined 2, right? We outlined George Odom, who they picked up, and then we outlined Tarvarius Moore, who's coming back. These are depth pieces, and especially with the injury history that the 49ers have had, it's unlucky. They're one of the most injury-prone teams in the NFL. Depth is important, and now Kyle Shanahan's kind of realizing that in the structure of how he builds his team.
I agree. And it's the right depth, too. It's not just depth. It's the right pieces at the depth. Going to get a George Odom, a guy that doesn't have a bunch of tread on his tires, compared to a Tavon Wilson, who had tread on his tires, who couldn't find a way to stay healthy, who couldn't contribute to the team last year. And that was Kyle's making that's why I said they're making the right moves. We just don't see it yet. Yeah.
And Odom, he is a special teams grab. But the thing is, guess what? We're increasing the depth in the special teams. One move that I wanted to point out the 49ers made that I was skeptical of at first was the signing of Oren Burks, because I thought we had a very, very similar player in Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. I thought Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles was that exact linebacker type of build, a guy who excelled at special teams, but kind of doesn't have a necessary role at linebacker, although he has the potential to be a solid linebacker. But guess what? I realized, especially after seeing the contract, which is extremely cheap. It's less than $1 million for both years in terms of cap hits, or close to less than $2 million or something like that for both years. It's extremely cheap for a guy who contributes at the weakest position on the team, which is special teams, and also shows potential. But most importantly, like you said, Breezie, it brings depth. And that's something that the 49ers that I'm starting to value a little more with this team, because that's a key facet that we've lacked in years past, and now we're starting to increase.
Agreed. And if you want to know why the New England Patriots were a dynasty, right? It's because they always had the right depth. And if you want to know why they couldn't beat the New York Football Giants, it's because they always had better right depth. Like they had the better depth. And it started on the defense. It was the defensive line. I remember them rotating. That's why you said arguably the 2021 defensive line was better than that 2019. The 2021 defensive line was compared to that 2007 Giants defensive line. Like that, it was compared to that Super Bowl run where they had Osei Numenora, they had oh my God, Michael Strahan on your outsides. Then they had insides. Then they were rotating Justin Tuck and they were rotating. Justin Tuck was coming off the bench. They had fresh right depth. Like they had the right depth. I'm telling you, 49ers figured it out. And they were so close. They were this close with the depth from last year and the starting positions from last year. And I just really, it's unfortunate that, Jimmy was injured because I know a lot of people saying, oh man, he almost blew the game in Dallas. Well, that's the game he got injured in. And I'm not throwing him a bone. He was terrible in that second half. He was horrible, but it could have been partly due to that injury. And then when we go to Green Bay, he couldn't do anything. Right? Shout out to Jordan Willis because he won that game and Hufanga who picked it up.
Respectfully, Aaron Rodgers didn't do anything in the second half either.
Because the defense was freaking amazing. The defense was amazing. And you're right. Respectfully, he didn't. But Jimmy couldn't capitalize off of it. And that's why I said maybe that injury was a cog in his play. And the 49ers are trying to not let that be the hindrance of his value. Get where I'm going with this? Like they're trying to say, look, what you saw wasn't Jimmy. So if I'm John Lynch, I'm spinning the injury. He was injured here. He was injured here. He was injured here. He had to get surgery. Guarantee you, when he's not like this, he plays like this. And that's how I'm flipping it. If I'm John, that's just me.
Yeah. Some other moves, speaking of depth, the 49ers this past week signed a former player of theirs at the defensive line position, Kerry Hyder. What are your thoughts on that one?
I thought it was a no-brainer, man. Like, you look, I love Arden Key. He's younger, and he was going to cost the 49ers more money. Right? And so once the moment Kerry Hyder was a free agent, with the moment Seattle cut him, I said the 49ers better figure it out. They better go get that guy. He's only performed well under Chris Kocurek. And I want to put this out there because a lot of people were saying that they rather have Key over they rather have Arden Key over Kerry Hyder. And I get it. Arden Key was a little bit more versatile. I think he lined up inside and outside. I get it. His production wasn't the same. He also didn't play as much as Kerry Hyder. And I want to put this out there. Kerry Hyder had, how many sacks was it? 8.5, 9 sacks, something like that. 9.5 sacks. He did that. 8.5. He did that without Nick Bosa. I just want to put that out there. He did that without the 49ers' best players on the line. No Nick Bosa, no D Ford. He was able to produce that. And so that's more when Eric Armstead was lining up on the outside. And so I'm saying that to say this, he can only be an addition. There's no way he could bring any negativity when it comes to his production. What he did in Seattle, maybe they had him playing different. Maybe it was an anomaly. Maybe he just can't work unless it's Chris Kocurek coaching him up. Who knows? But I tell you what, they let him go. And, what's that pirate thing? One man's loss is another man's treasure. I don't know. I be messing up them sayings. Yeah. But anyway, we got him back. He's where he belongs. He wants to be in San Francisco because if he didn't, he wouldn't have signed that deal. And I guarantee you, he's going to at least get you 5.5 sacks easily. And he'll be a rotation guy.
And the one thing that I'll say, like Kerry Hyder, like the one critique on him was a lot of the sacks that he had were hustle plays. And I'll agree. A lot of the sacks that Kerry Hyder had in 2020 were somewhat of a hustle play, not necessarily of wins, right? But the thing is, when you look at this defense, you don't necessarily need the wins because you had that other defensive line setting up key opportunities. And you said the key point. He played without Nick Bosa in 2020. Now imagine playing with Nick Bosa, with Arik Armstead, not on the outside, but on the inside. And other pass rushers alongside that, like a Charles Omenihu, like a Jordan Willis, like even a Hassan Ridgeway, other areas where now you have one-on-one opportunities. And that's something that kind of will free up more space for Kerry Hyder. And now with the revamped secondary where you have better players, you don't necessarily need the wins because the hustle plays will still get there because the secondary can now hold up for longer with the switch more to a man press system where players like Charvarius Ward will excel. And so that's the upside of Kerry Hyder. And the thing is, the one thing that I'm fine with is Kerry Hyder is not necessarily a guy who will make the roster, right? Kerry Hyder could get cut at training camp, but there's no harm in bringing those guys in because you have 90 spots available. And so if you're bringing in some sort of talent who is familiar with the system, like you said, there isn't a harm in bringing those guys in just to compete and see, do they have some extra juice? Do they have some extra, something that you haven't seen before? Have they improved their game? And if so, where can you utilize that in this defense? And with the 49ers expectation of drafting a defensive end early, you can now have a different group to compete because like we said, depth is important. It's not a harm. It's rather, like you said, one man's whatever is another man's treasure.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is. We'll figure it out.
I don't know none of that pirate stuff either, but yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt the team. And I think that with the way the contract is stipulated, you can definitely move on from him before the season starts. It's not necessarily it's a low risk, high upside type of signing or mid upside type of signing because Kerry Hyder, he's going to be brought in as a rotational player and he has the ability to potentially wreak havoc alongside better players than he played with in 2020.
That's all I was trying to say, bro. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And I would be shocked if Kerry Hyder didn't make this team. If he's healthy going through camp, I would be shocked if he didn't make this team because he would be the perfect leader on that second unit. What is the cliche, Sean? I can't remember it. I'm not looking it up. I'm not. I want to know what it is. If you know what it is, put it in there.
Other two signings that we had over the past week, defensive backs. We brought back Darqueze Dennard on a 1-year deal, and we also brought back Mr. Do-It-All, Dante Johnson, Death Taxes, and Dante Johnson. What are your two thoughts on those two players?
Knew Dante was coming back because you're the
one that brought it up, I think. You wrote something about it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it just made sense. He can do it all. Hey, you ever heard of you ever played a fantasy basketball or something? They got a utility guy. He's that. Yeah. That's hey Dante, go play kicker. Okay, coach. Dante, go punt the ball. No problem. Dante, go fair, whatever. He can do it. He does. It's like a jack of all trades. He might not do things extra well, but he can do them all, right? And especially on the secondary and the defense. And so as much he's not gonna bring, I tell you what, he got better. He progressed last season. I felt like he got better. And I know he's a veteran. And that's good to have a veteran in the room. But if you need him to play nickel, he can play nickel. If you need him to play safety, he can play safety. If you need him to play on the outside, he can play on the outside. He might not play it all well, though. That's the issue. But he's depth. He's depth, and he's veteran depth with the mentality of how the system works. He's been with the 49ers off and on throughout his career. And so I think that's a guy that they value because he understands what's going on. He understands the Miko Ryans. He understands the mindset of what the coach wants. He understands the coach's vision. And I think that's a guy you bring back. You bring back as far as Dennard, I don't understand that one. He didn't show me anything other than playing in the nickel. Week 17 against the Rams? I think that was his only game.
Yeah,
I personally would have gave Jason Verrett his contract and just said, Verrett, get healthy, show up to the team, and then boom. You know what I'm saying? Unless Verrett's agent really think that they're going to get more money, that's what I would have did. I would have brought back, and I still think they might. I still think. They may bring Jason Verrett back on a 1-year deal. You want Verrett in your cornerback room because if he's healthy, he's better than, no disrespect, he's better than mostly Thomas, Lenore, and everybody else you got in that room. I don't know if he's better than Ward, but I'm going to go on a limb and say he's better than damn Charvarius Ward at this point. You know what I'm saying? He was a lockdown corner in the NFL. He was locked. You couldn't throw on his side. And if you can get him on one of those low risk, high reward deals, why not? If he gets injured, there's a clause for that the 49ers will win because he will have to sign one of those type of contracts. It's unfortunate. He would have to sign one of those type of contracts. You know what I'm saying? One man's trash is another man's treasure. Is that the saying? Thank you.
I guess so. Two people said it. Jeff said it as well.
Okay.
But speaking on Johnson and Verrett and last week when I came on here, I did say that I would prefer that Dante Johnson was signed as opposed to Jason Verrett for the 49ers. The reason was, like you said, Dante Johnson's a versatility guy. The 49ers preach versatility in that room. We know that Emmanuel Mosley can play inside and out. That's a benefit. And we've seen Dante Johnson play outside corner, inside at the nickel, and also at the safety spot all just last season. We saw him play key reps at all places, and it's not like he excelled, but he did good enough where you can be comfortable playing him in either three positions for the time being. So I definitely preach like that portion of the signing. But the most important part is Dante Johnson brings a lot of value to our teams or to our special teams. And I think that that's kind of like the main value where he's going to play, because you're not bringing him in to start, right? He's not going to be a starting cornerback kind of for this 49ers group, which means he's got to provide some other value for him to be a valuable player or a valuable addition to the team. And that's on special teams. And that's the part where Jason Verrett won't play, especially at this point of his career, given his injury history. He hasn't really shown an affinity to play special teams, at least while he's been with the 49ers. And so that's the benefit that I thought Dante Johnson provided as opposed to Jason Verrett, because while Verrett can be very good when he's healthy, of course, the caveat is he going to be healthy enough for you to pay him a good amount of money? And so you take availability over that and the versatility that Dante Johnson provides, not only in the secondary, but on special teams. But Verrett is still a good guy where you can take a flyer on him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also brought him in. They do, I think, have 6 or 7 cornerbacks right now, which are very scored. The 2 rookies, Lenore and Thomas. They now have Dante Johnson. They now have Darqueze Dennard. And I think it's Kadar Holman as the last guy alongside Emmanuel Mosley. So I think it is 7 in total, with one of those guys being a reserve future player. So you definitely have room, at least for training camp type of deals, if you want to bring a guy like Verrett in. And I think Verrett could be one of the veterans on the practice squad. That's something that I propose, where Verrett can definitely be on the practice squad, because it's valuable having a guy at least with low tread for a season, with the talent that he has, especially in both man and zone coverage, the talent that he has. It'd definitely be beneficial if injuries do occur, which we've seen that they have occurred, in that secondary for the 49ers. As for Darqueze Dennard, you're right. We saw him playing essentially one game where he proved value, and that was the Week 18 game where he played in the slot. So do the 49ers view him as a veteran nickel that can compete to start for the 49ers in 2022? I know that when Shanahan and John Lynch were talking about it, they said that, or I think it was Shanahan today or Lynch yesterday, one of the two said that the plan was for Deommodore Lenore, who we drafted last year, to kind of get the competing reps to start at nickelback. And I think that this signing might prove that they might go away from the draft, although I'm not sure that that's the true reality, because there are still a good amount of slot corners. Marcus Jones from Houston, for example, in the draft that the 49ers could target, that could not only provide help in the nickel, but also on special teams. And so there are also a good amount of players still in free agency. So I don't think they're done at cornerback yet. I do think that they'll still add one in the draft, at least to compete, or add one in free agency to compete. But Darqueze Dennard, at the moment, I don't view him as a starting caliber guy, at least at this point in his career. I don't know if he makes the roster. I assume his contract stipulates that it's likely a prove-it deal, but also with very low guarantees, so they can cut him should they need to prior to the season starting.
Yeah, I like what you said. They brought him in to compete. They brought him in to compete. To compete. That's why they brought him in. And if he does outcompete someone, 9 times out of 10 he'll make the roster if he can provide value, just not at the nickel slot. Like they're gonna, if he's gonna be a depth guy, he's gonna have to be able to be versatile somewhere else other than just that nickel. Unless they really feel like he's going to be the nickel, then they could use Lenore on special teams or whatnot. So we shall see. And if they draft a guy, oh man, the competition is gonna get fired up. If they draft Marcus Jones out of Houston, probably the best daggone nickelback in the draft. Even though I would like to,
he's my week 1 starter. If that's the case.
Week one, bro. Week 1. Why? He can kick return. You could put that punt return, Ray McLeod. Now you're lessening up a role. Now guys are going to be more healthy. You're putting your younger guy out there. Marcus Jones is coming off of those shoulder injuries, I do believe. But listen, man, that kid got 8, 9 kickoff returns from last year. You got to put career return. You got to put him in. You got to. He came to visit the 49ers. I can much see them drafting a guy like that because of his value and his speed and his ability to play wide receiver, cornerback, outside and inside and kickoff and punt returner. So that's a guy I could see them being high on. Real talk.
And the thing is, Marcus Jones's build is very, very similar to K'Wan Williams. He's 5'8",
Very
about
similar.
175. And I think
Very
that'd be a very ideal replacement for a guy like K'Wan Williams because he brings the physicality. He plays bigger than his size. But like you said, he has experience outside and inside. That's the versatility the 49ers like. But also he saves them a roster spot because he's not only a cornerback guy, but he's a special teams guy. And so it kind of goes towards the 49ers special teams philosophy where they're not going to sign extra players on special teams just to play special teams.
Exactly.
There's a reason that Ensemble Webster didn't make the roster last year. That's the example I keep going to over Travis Benjamin because Benjamin offered better wide receiver upside. And so they're going to like players like Ray McLeod, who's going to have a presence in the offensive game this year for the 49ers. And if they have Marcus Jones, he's going to have a presence in special teams, but also in the cornerback room where, in my opinion, he should be the day one starter if he gets drafted by the 49ers.
I agree.
Some other moves. There's one other guy that they signed. It was, I believe, yesterday that they made it official, and that was tight end Ross Dwelley. He's liked by some, not liked by others. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know why people don't like him. Great person, but his production. Like, let's talk about his production. I don't know if it was designed by plan or what, but he was totally insignificant in 2021. Like insignificant.
Right.
And 2020 was his year. George Kittle was injured the majority of that year, and he proved that he wasn't putting up like George Kittle numbers, but I think he had a good amount of touchdowns. He had over almost 300 yards that year. The thing I like about Dwelley is he can catch. The thing I don't like about Dwelley is he can't block. And I think for Kyle, that's the issue. So then my question is, why bring him back? Why not get a different type of tight end in free agency or just draft a guy? And I still think they're going to draft a guy. I really do. They have the picks, they have the capital, the draft capital to draft a tight end. This draft is loaded with tight ends. Even if there's a run on the tight ends, there'll be a second and the third run on tight. There's a lot of tight ends you can get that can provide you things that Ross Dwelley can do. What Ross Dwelley does do well, though, is he can line up in the backfield and play fullback. I know a lot of people don't remember that, but remember when Kyle Juszczyk was hurt? Who was the guy back there? It was Ross Dwelley. So there's some value for him, but the contract is dope for the 49ers. Like it's a good contract for the Niners, right? It's one of those contracts. So great signing. I think having him back, I don't know what he's going to provide because I don't know how he's going to be utilized. But if the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, they utilize him, he can be valuable, right? It's just that they got to use him.
Right. And the thing about Ross Dwelley is, me personally, I'm fine with bringing him back because I don't think he makes the roster. We saw in 2021, one thing that you alluded to, 2020 was his year. When George Kittle was hurt, he did have some kind of traction in the receiving game. But 2021 proved how the 49ers thought of him. He had, despite having a good 2020, he had diminished snaps. He actually played less than tight end Charlie Warner, who the 49ers drafted in the fifth round in 2020. Or I think it was the sixth round. Charlie Warner played 23% of the offensive snaps. Ross Dwelley played just 18%. And speaking on how Kyle Shanahan likes multi-dimensional players, Charlie Warner played 72% of the special team snaps in 2021, where Ross Dwelley played just 46. So if Charlie Warner is eclipsing him not only in the offensive snaps, but in the special team snaps, I don't really see a role for a guy who's already at a high age. I think Ross Dwelley is 27. Charlie Warner's only like 24, 25. So I think that's kind of where Ross Dwelley is pacing him out. And from what I've heard, they are trying to move on from Ross Dwelley because they view him as a backup. And they might want to get younger at the position, especially with George Kittle's recurring injury issues. And also just to get some tread off George Kittle's legs, right? Because the way that you utilize George Kittle more is don't put him in as many blocking situations, or if you do, don't put him in as many receiving situations, right? Kind of stick it or efficiently use him so that he gets the production that you require from him, but also remains more healthy throughout the entire course of the year. And that's where I think that they'd be better off having either a better receiving option or strong blocking option. And I've heard that also that they've been more inclined, or John Lynch has been active in looking at tight ends. Two names that I did hear were Trey Berry was one of them, who's kind of been rising up boards, now projected as a third, fourth round pick, although I don't know that he's going to go after him. And I do think that the 49ers should target tight end. I thought that they were going to target it in free agency. Obviously, that hasn't been the case. Guys like Robert Tonyan and the main options have been off the board. So they have been off the board. So it seems like they're going to target in the draft. They have 9 picks to do so, and they could trade up to get one of the better tight ends. Jalen Weidemeyer could be a guy who's been falling off a little bit. So they could acquire him in the later rounds and try and get another backup. I don't necessarily think Ross Dwelley makes the roster in 2022, which is why it's a fine signing. Because like we said earlier, it's okay to compete at positions, right? In training camp and in the early parts of the offseason program, that's like what's valuable.
Yeah, and it's funny. A lot of these guys may not make the roster, especially the one-year contract guys. Like, that's the point. Yeah. You're bringing them in. You got to fill your roster. The roster has to be filled. All right? There are a bunch of tight ends. I think Weidemeyer is the best tight end in the draft. Unfortunately, he's slow. Apparently, in his pro day. Yeah, 5'1", 8".
It was something. One of the slowest tight end times.
He ran slower than an offensive lineman. That's a problem for Kyle Shanahan. Everything happens so fast, but he's the best tight end, in my opinion, in this draft. And there are a lot of them, right? So there are a lot of them. I see Isaiah Likely out there. Yep. There are a bunch of guys. Trey McBride. There are a bunch of guys that you can get. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a no-brainer you draft a tight end in this draft. And like you said, these guys could fall later, and there could be some great guys later on in the draft. It could be another 5th-round pick still.
And it hasn't been a secret that the 49ers have kind of tried to address the TE2 spot with George Kittle, right? The first guy was Jordan Reed. They tried to sign him, trying to use him as a reclamation project after he had consistent injuries with Washington. Unfortunately, those injury issues sustained when he was with the 49ers in those early kind of years of the Kyle Shanahan era. Then it was Ross Dwelley. But Ross Dwelley served mainly as a receiving option and now has fallen out. They kind of view him as a backup. But again, he doesn't provide the blocking ability that they do like in the running game, which is why his offensive snaps has diminished over the last year. And also, the third guy was Charlie Warner. They keep trying to invest assets, although it's not high-round assets as people like because they already have a high kind of caliber player at the position. They're trying to invest assets. So I do expect them to spend a mid to late round pick on a tight end in this draft. Again, just to try and get a better TE2 because it doesn't seem like Ross Dwelley is going to be that guy. And Charlie Warner is kind of seen as mainly a primarily blocking tight end. And he did have his moments, but he's a primarily blocking tight end, a good guy where you might want to have in that TE3 spot. And one other name that I'll mention, the guy who they envisioned as their tight end 2 last offseason, a guy who got cut, Michael Pruitt from the Tennessee Titans. They paid him a hefty guarantee. It was about $500,000. They envisioned him making the 53-man roster, but he disappointed in training camp, and they cut him and ate that $500,000 in dead cap and moved on from him with this tight end room. So it's not like they haven't been trying to move on from Ross Dwelley. I think they tried to move on from him last offseason as well by having Michael Pruitt kind of eclipse him, but Michael Pruitt did not fare well in training camp last year.
Yeah, good points. Good points.
What's up, Jerome?
What's good, Jerome?
Popping in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But those were the main moves for the 49ers now. What are the kind of the extra moves that you might want to see from them heading on before the draft?
As far as free agency, I feel like they're done. But if they can go get my man Treader in here and you slide him over to the guard position, I know Lynch said that. So Lynch is funny, right? Because Lynch said that, Alex Mack is going to be returning, pretty much, talk to Alex Mack. And he said that he's been working out. And I'm like, when? He just got married. So what kind of working out has he been doing? Like, because I know he wasn't working out, but maybe he was working out to fit into the suit. I don't know, but he said he's been training and all that type of stuff. So if he has, it's good to have Alex Mack back for another run, right? But you still, do you draft a center? Or do you try to sign a free agent that can step in and replace Alex Mack and you get a veteran? And the 49ers really scare me at developing offensive linemen. I'm sorry. I just don't think that's their forte.
You're not wrong at all.
And I think they can coach offensive linemen that are developed, but I don't think that they can develop offensive linemen, right? And so I would just go out and get the sure thing. It It's only going to cost you a few dollars. I don't know how much Treader's going to be asking for. I don't know if they are in talks. There's still a possibility that Alex Mack retires, so it could be one of those things where they sign him on draft day. You know what I'm saying? So we'll have to see. But they can draft the center, and you guys know who I want if we're going to draft the center. It's definitely it's Cam Jurgens. I want that athleticism on my team, and I'm sorry he's moving up in the draft. I was talking to Brad. Brad thinks he's going to go way higher than what he looks like he's projected, and I agree. And I'm tired of the 49ers missing out on that position, right? You could have got Cesar Ruiz. You could have got my man, oh my gosh, who was it last year? Creed Humphrey. Okay, you let him go to Kansas City. What in the world is wrong with us? Like, right? And then boom. But I was happy we got Alex Mack. And I just think if you get one of those young guys in here, I would like to start there because the most important position on the offensive line is not the left tackle. It's most expensive. For Kyle Shanahan, it's the center. It's really the center. And I think
going off that last point. Yeah. Oh, you finish up and then I'll go ahead.
I think Alex Mack has been like really good and a godsend, and it was a perfect swap from Weston Richburg, who couldn't be healthy, who couldn't stay healthy. But I do like Jake Brendel. I don't know why I like him, but I like Jake Brendel. I felt like when he was asked to step in, he did the dang thing. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, he's also coming off an injury. So draft the center. Just call it a day. Even if that was the only position they drafted and for an offensive line, I would be ecstatic.
Yeah, and the reason I'm kind of like enamored with JC Treader, the addition of him, it's not necessarily because we need him and because we're willing to pay him, but JC Treader, right? When you look at it, what is the 49ers kind of history when going after centers? You said the first one, Weston Richburg was the first guy the 49ers tried to get when the Kyle Shanahan regime started. And obviously he was injured. He had to retire because of injuries. And we paid him a 5-year, $47.5 million deal. That's an expensive deal for a center. And we're still paying him dead money. Then the next guy that we got, or after that, it was Jake Garland, right? For a year, or I think that's his name. Or Ben Garland.
Ben Garland. I like the Ben Garland too.
We had him for a year, and that was the one guy that we drafted that we actually played at center. But then guess what? The next transition is Alex Mack. We pay Alex Mack for a 3-year deal because Kyle Shanahan does like it. You said center is one of the most important positions on the offensive line. Kyle Shanahan does agree with that. He's shown because that's how he divests his assets, right? He puts money into the center position and into the left tackle position, the two positions he values the most, because he wants that kind of veteran leadership on the offensive line. And that's where a guy like JC Treader kind of falls into play. Can JC Treader play guard? I believe he can for a year.
Absolutely.
And especially in the Shanahan system with the Cleveland Browns. I think that he can definitely play center for a year. He has familiarity because Kevin Stefanski runs a very similar kind of system to Kyle Shanahan in that it's predicated on that run game with the play action pass involved. So JC Treader shouldn't be that hard of a transition. And I think that JC Treader can slide in at guard for a year, take on an Alex Mack type of contract where it's a 3-year deal, kind of backloaded to help the 49ers, but also gives JC Treader financial flexibility heading into his the wrong side of his 30s. You slide him in at right guard and then take over at center next year for the time being. The only thing is, do the 49ers want to divest that money this year, or do they want to divest that money next year when it's a certainty that Alex Mack probably retires next offseason? Because that's kind of the one question. But I do think that it's also better because the 49ers, they've shown a propensity for kind of looking towards the future while also competing in the present. And JC Treader solves that because you're competing in the present by getting a very good talent at right guard for the year, but also looking forward to the future because you have your center of the future for the next couple of years, another respected veteran in JC Treader, just like you had in Alex Mack. And that's a very good sign for Trey Lance because Treader can get involved with this 49ers offense and Trey Lance, get familiar with Trey Lance this year, and then move over to center where their two relationship is going to be a key cog for year to come.
Great points.
I have a feeling that Kyle will just buy another center again. I agree with you. Can't develop linemen as good, and Kyle seems very aware. I mean, it's the truth, right? They haven't been able to develop linemen. Mike McGlinchey was our highest pick, and he really hasn't evolved into a top-end tackle like you probably envision a top 10 pick should. Other guys that we've drafted, like we kind of, after that type of pick, we've kind of slid back. We don't necessarily draft high, probably because we aren't comfortable with taking players that high if we're not able to develop them, right? The last guy was Aaron Banks, and hopefully he pans out like we have, but we haven't seen it yet. Obviously, we have to wait and see it. I'm not saying I've been kind of vocal about support for Aaron Banks, but we have to wait and see it, right? We have to see when he plays, because obviously he didn't play the entirety of last season. The other guys we've drafted are in the 5th to 7th round. Maybe that gives Kyle Shanahan like less slack because you draft them in later rounds, but it also shows that they're not as comfortable drafting them in the earlier rounds. Creed Humphrey being one of the prime examples of that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but yeah. So we addressed the offensive line, addressed safety. In the draft, what is kind of like the first position you want to head with the amount of holes
so
now that we have?
That's the toughest
Or maybe for the first two, positions. How about that?
So my first 2 positions would be offensive line, interior, and edge. Like,
okay,
if my safety is gone, so if Jalen Petra is up there from Baylor, I'm picking him over everything.
Yeah.
Or if Jaquan Brisker is up there, if David Ajobo is up there, well, I'm talking about safety. So if Jaquan Brisker or Jalen Petra is sitting at 61 for some strange reason, I'm drafting him. I'm getting my safety. I'm good for 5 years. You have the Darren James 2.0 with Brisker. I like Petra too, because Petra, he can play safety, corner, nickel. He plays nickel. He can play safety. He's just a freelancing guy that can play back there. Yeah. I like him. Playmaker. Gets interceptions too. Mm-hmm. And also is really good in the run game. That's actually his strength. He's a box guy. So if those 2 guys are on the board, I'm sorry, I would go safety. I love Marcus Jones, but I think that the 49ers need to address their needs. And I don't think they need Marcus Jones. I want Marcus Jones. The 49ers need a safety, they need an offensive guard, and they need a freaking edge rusher that can pair well with Nick Bosa, because like you just said earlier on the show, we have great depth. Oh, man, don't tell me his stock went up. What the hell did he do since the last time I watched him? Damn. Sorry, man. Dang. Well, you know what we got? How hard would it be for us to trade up to get, at pick in the second round? How hard would it be for the 49ers to trade up to pick early in the second round? That's my question to you.
So for me, I think they have the capital, but I'll be realistic. My personal prediction I was going to say after this was the 49ers don't trade up in the second round, but I do think the 49ers are going to trade up in the 3rd round and get an extra 3rd round pick. I think they might trade that 4th round pick, because the bread and butter of this class is in that kind of the 2nd round, 3rd round, and early 4th round range. I think that's the bread and butter of this class. So they might trade their pick at 130 or somewhere around there.
134.
And move up. Yeah, 134, and move up into the 3rd round. And trying, like they did it last offseason, right? They traded up with their 3rd round pick. What they did was they traded back from 43 to 48 and took Aaron Banks. And then they traded that extra pick that they got alongside their 4th round pick to move up to 88 and draft Trey Sermon. I can envision a very similar scenario where they potentially trade back in the 2nd round, although I'm not sure about that. But I think that we have the capital already where we can just trade our 4th round pick with some extra compensation to move up in the 3rd round and get another valuable position, where now we'd have 61, that extra 3rd round pick, and 93 to make 3 valuable kind of picks. Because while talent is high in this class, the other thing that's high is depth.
We have 105 too, which is a comp pick. So we have that would be 3 3rd round picks.
Yeah, Oof. 3 3rd round picks. And I think that that'd be very good, because one other thing to mention, the 49ers are probably going to try and shed cap right in the draft.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is lessen the amount of picks. So that they don't have to restructure as much, or they don't have to move as much salary, so that they can sign the draft class. So I do think that they probably be more inclined to trade up into that 3rd round range, give up some extra capital, save money on that, while also getting a valuable player, not only for 2022, but also for the future. Yeah, having 4 picks in the first 105 picks in the first 3 rounds, despite not having a 1st round pick, I think that it's very valuable in a class that's predicated in this 2nd, 3rd, and early 4th round range for sure.
That's a good theory, man. I prefer to trade up in the 2nd round and get Jalen Petra, like or Jaquan Brisker. Never mind having a value pick at the 3rd. You get one of those 2 players, you have a game changer, playmaker on your team for 5 years, right? Cheap.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
I think Petra, honestly, might go in like ahead of Jaquan Brisker. Like if the way that he's been testing and the way that he's been playing, he might even go ahead of Brisker. So I love Brisker still. I think Brisker might be a top 3 safety. I think Brisker's a top 3 safety in this class.
Yeah.
But Petra
I think it's
might
Hamilton
just keep going up and up.
See, it's tough. So it'll be Hamilton for me. I like Sine Lewis too. I'm not gonna front out of Georgia. He's a thumper. Oh my gosh. So it would be Hamilton, Sine, Brisker, Petra. Those would be my top 4.
Okay.
I think those would be
my top 3. Hamilton, although I'm not sure where we'll end up placing him. Brisker at 2, and then Daxton Hill at 3. I
forgot about Daxton Hill. I'm sorry. My bad, Michigan. My bad, Blue. My bad. I forgot about Daxton Hill. He's definitely in my top 3. So that'll be my top 5. Hey, speaking of Hamilton, he ran slow as hell too. 4.72?
Somewhere around there. He was.
That's ridiculous slow. What? How do you think his stock drops? That's slow.
I don't necessarily know. It depends, because I think a lot of people, I don't know his 10-yard or 20-yard off the top of my head. But I think a lot of people will be more interested in I think the thing with Kyle Hamilton, he's not necessarily a great straight line runner, right?
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily impact the mind and the way that he approaches players, because it might not always be in a straight line. He might like the way that he approaches tackles. So that's where I think it's not necessarily as big of a hit to his draft stock. I still think he probably goes in the top, 15 probably, just to be safe, probably top 15 to a team, and he might go even as high as like top 7, just because
he'll still be the first safety off the board.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's his stock kind of gets boosted by the fact that a lot of teams aren't certain about certain prospects, right? So they might want to go with the option of Hamilton just because he might be a better player, and even if they don't know how to play him, he might be a better player than some of the other players at the top of the board for certain teams. Yeah, so they just might be more inclined to go with the safer pick, and deal with the ramifications of how to play him later.
I agree. I'm sorry I'm big on safety, but back to the question, to answer your question, I would look to see who's on the board, and if there's a better edge rusher. I'm a huge fan of Nick Bonito out of Oklahoma. I really like him. I also like Sam Williams out of Ole Miss. But there's some guys that might be available, like your Drake Jacksons out of USC. I know a lot of people like Majay Sanders out of Cincinnati. There's so many, but you got to get them early, because I think once you get past that, like pick 100. Like where Malone might be still, what's his name?
Malone, yeah.
Like he's another good, but Logan Hall, like there's some good edge rushers in this draft. The question is, which one does the 49ers think fits them the best? Who would complement, if I'm drafting the edge rusher, I'm finding who would complement Nick Bosa the best? Well, they got power on one side, so you're going to want to make sure you can be faster on the other side. That's the compliment. You don't want 2 power guys, bull rushing guys. And credit to Nick Bosa, who's wicked fast all of a sudden. He's like a speed power guy now, right? Just go get me the short guy. Go get me the short thing. What's that? I was just looking him up the other day. He's the fastest edge rusher in the draft.
Amari. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's speed. And he's 6'5", 6'6". Get speed if available. Get speed if available. So it would depend. Now I'm a Dylan Prime guy. I don't know why I like this kid. When I watch his film, I'm just like, that's a 49er. That's your Creed Humphrey. That's the guy you want. He can play center and guard. Bam, bam.
Don't say that's your Creed Humphrey, because then we're gonna pass on him.
My bad. That's Dylan Parham then. That's who he is. Yep. That's who he is. Because we did pass on Creed and we passed on Cesar Ruiz. Two mistakes. I don't think they make the mistake again. So depending on who's available, but you gave a really good scenario. If I'm staying at 61, I'm picking the best player at those positions, and whoever I feel like I need the most, I'm going to draft. And it's either edge or that. And then I think they can still get a safety later on in the draft. I think they can get Leon O'Neal Jr. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They can get him. They can get JT Woods out of Baylor. That's another guy. Look, there's some guys, there's some ballers in this draft. They don't have to go in the first, second, or third round. Just remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And that last point, that's why this draft is so interesting, right? Because a lot of people are worried about 61, right? Is there going to be enough talent remaining at 61? In my opinion, it's the opposite. I think there's going to be too much talent available at 61. And that's why, like, we talk about all these names and we're like, oh, these guys might go early. These guys might go early. The problem is everyone can't go earlier than 61 because if some guys are going early, that means some guys are falling, which means the 49ers are going to get some talent there still at 61. And I think that's true for the picks at 93 and 105 as well. I think talent is still going to be on the board. It's just how do you place it? Because a lot of players or a lot of teams, right, they're going to view these players differently. It's not like everyone's going to have the same board, right? Everyone goes as according to their needs. Some people like power rushers, some people like speed rushers, right? So certain players are going to go different ways. And you're going to see a run of players sometimes like at edge, right? You'll probably see a good run in the first round, but that run might dry up and there might be a run another position because once teams realize, oh, the edge run has kind of gone, it might go safety, right? And people are like, oh, wait, we don't want to miss out on the safety class. So they might reach at safety and not go with a better player at edge or something like that. So there's definitely a good amount of talent on the board. And so I do think that the 49ers should be set where they select at 61. And that's why I'm somewhat of a proponent of drafting best player available at that position, because there are a good amount. It's not necessarily that we have a lot of needs, right? In this, like right now, and the places that we have needs, there's a good amount of talent at all those positions in the class. Like you might view offensive line as a need. There's a good amount of talent at interior. There's also a good amount of tackle talent. I like the interior talent more, but there's a good amount of talent there. Look at safety as a need. There's a good amount of safeties, a couple we just named. Look at edge as a need. This is one of the most loaded edge classes I've seen in a while. So all three positions, and I mean, you might go value as well with receiver or something like that. There's a ton of positions where there's a good amount of value in this class where the 49ers can feel comfortable going best player available on their board, depending on who that is, at one of those positions and be comfortable with the pick, because then you can go at the next position at 103 or 93 and the next position at 105 or something like that and end up with three quality starters with your first three picks.
Bingo. And I think that's the way they built their team in free agency. I think that's how they supplemented it in free agency, and they got the right pieces. And so now they're going to go in the draft and go to work, and it's going to be a show. I can't wait.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, for some reason, if Jimmy Garoppolo is moved on draft day, that's just going to increase the amount of capital that you have for some, like, it could be a possibility because, I mean, obviously that's the clearest way to sign your draft class. So it could be a possibility, although it does seem at the moment that he's likely to be traded for 2023 compensation. But we're going to have a good amount of picks, especially mid-round picks. We should have the ammunition to move up should we want to get in that bread and butter in the middle rounds of this draft and select some key guys. And there should be ample opportunity to select players, like the best player available on their board at those positions.
You own it, brother. You own it.
Hey, man, we've been talking about a good amount of stuff for an hour and a half. For those of you who are still in here, thank you guys so much. Before we sign off, make sure you hit Wayne Breezie on Twitter. Follow that, and make sure you hit the link in the description. Go subscribe to Wayne. Thank you guys so much for being in here, and great talking with you, brother.
Yeah, same here, bro.
All right, guys. We'll see you soon.